of the Scottish Conservatives, Ruth Davidson, who's married to her female partner and who strongly objects to the DUP's ultra-conservative family values, made her push for moderation, both when it came to Brexit and family values.
It's not about hard or soft. It's not even in many places about left or right. It's about open or closed. And I stand firmly on the side of open.
Yeah, and within the Conservative Party, there really seems to be a discussion going on. The British press says that that discussion goes beyond just the Conservative Party. The Daily Telegraph saying both Conservatives and Labour MPs have been working to flesh out a soft Brexit deal. The London Evening Standard quoting cabinet members, the Evening Standard calling it a battle inside the cabinet, pitting sensibles versus creationists when it comes to Brexit negotiations. This is the paper of the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne. Is it, Rory Broomfield, is there a battle going on between sensibles and creationists right now inside the British government?
Well, not that I know of. Steve Baker, who was leader of Conservatives for Leave and is a very prominent Brexiteer, has just been appointed to the Department for Exiting the EU. And George Osborne, along with others on his side of the Conservative Party, are seemingly yesterday's men. They are really revealing themselves to be bitter individuals who have lost their position within the party and are trying to wreck it for not just the party, but also for the country as a whole.
So what do you make of this cabinet reshuffle? I don't want to get too much into inside baseball, but the return of the likes of Michael Gove, what signal does that send to you?
It signals a positive one. Michael Gove was a prominent Leaver. He made the case vigorously during the referendum campaign last year and has been consistent in the view that the UK should leave the single market, should be open and global, and be the great globalists that we can be outside the EU.
Mary Honeyball, your thoughts on what's going on right now and your reaction to these reports that there are secret talks between Conservatives and Labour MPs going on?
Yeah, I've heard those reports, and I know there have been calls for a cross-party commission to look at the whole question of Brexit, which I actually think is a good idea. One of your French colleagues at the programme earlier talked about the UK becoming more like Europe in terms of its governance. I don't actually agree with that. I think we are still very much in a two-party situation with people taking up positions. Although people might disagree across the parties about Brexit, they still are within their silos. So I think the idea of having a cross-party negotiating commission who can actually achieve something in terms of Brexit, how it goes, what it looks like, is an extremely good idea, and that is much more European, and I would like very much to see that happening. In terms of George Osborne and the London Evening Standard, which of course is is in my region, and I read the Evening Standard, of course. I mean, George Osborne does have an agenda, obviously, but I think it's very healthy that we are having newspapers saying the sorts of things that the London Evening Standard is. Because one thing that was very clear during the referendum campaign is that there were newspapers which are taking up a very, very amplified version of Leave and coming out with all sorts of things in a very, very biased way. So I think George Osborne is at least writing the balance slightly, and that's got to be good.
You agree with that, Jeremy Stubbs?
Oh, I think George Osborne is an ex-politician with his own axe to grind, and his newspaper has been grinding it.
When it comes to the tabloids, that they got too caustic, both last year during the referendum campaign and during the snap general election campaign just now.
Well, I think tabloids have been doing that for a very long time. There's nothing surprising, nothing new about that. What I think is important, really, is that to understand what's happening, this whole Brexit process was always going to be largely in two phases. A first phase after the referendum up until the launching of Article 50 at the beginning of the negotiations, where it was really a question of reuniting the country over what had been a very divisive issue.
So when Mary Honeyball talks about how it would be a good idea to have a parliamentary commission that brings both sides of the aisle together, do you agree with her?
I don't know about that specifically, but I think we are in a new phase, and it's going to be, in some senses, much less of a controversial phase. I mean, what Theresa May did, I think, up until March, April, was a splendid job of reuniting people. People accepted the idea of Brexit. They've come to accept it, which is why it wasn't even an issue in the election, much to Mrs. May's distress, in fact. It was a sign of her success. But now we're going to enter a period of negotiation. It's no longer a period of, say, talking tough for a domestic audience. It's a time, I think, of allowing the specialists, the negotiators, the technicians to get into the detail of that and find us the real agreement, soft or hard. I don't think it matters about the word. David Davis said himself, these are just propaganda terms. What we want is the deal that will work for everyone. That's got to start now, and it requires, I think, many minds to contribute to it. So I'm not at all against what Mary has said about some sort of cooperation. We've got to be more open now.
All right, you mentioned David Davis. He's the Brexit minister in the United Kingdom. This Tuesday, warning it could go well, those negotiations, or it could all go very wrong.
This is part of the negotiation, you know. It's whether you're buying a house or doing an international trade negotiation or an international negotiation, you know, you always have to have the walkaway option. It's not a choice. It's not what you want, but you've got to have it there.
You always have to have the walkaway option. Is that walkaway option nearer or further away after the snap general election, François Lafont?
This is what they used to say. I mean, this is better to have no deal than a bad deal. So I presume this is exactly, I mean, they are still on this trend. The point is, according to me, that the population and some sector of activities of the UK, they realize what will be the consequences of the Brexit. I mean, you cannot just say it will be a soft Brexit. If you look at the industrial confederation, I mean, they are starting to understand what does it mean for the city, what does it mean for Airbus with 10,000 people going on the continent. I mean, there are a certain number of things, facts, that prove that it will be very complicated for the country to go outside the European Union. So now they have to find the way to make sure that maybe this is not what they are going to do. But it needs time, because you cannot overcome the decision of a referendum and then, but this election is the first moment and say, well, she is weak, this prime minister, and they have no consensus of what she will do.
So does it bring the UK closer to a soft or a hard Brexit, this election result?
I don't know exactly. The point is that the people, the public opinion, realize what does it mean now, concretely. And the business, that means even the economy is going a little bit down. There will be some consequences. I mean, I used to work for 3 years in London. This is a very pragmatic people. They will understand where is the interest of the country. And the interest of the country is not outside, is still in.
Roy Broomfield?
Well, London may have voted Remain last year in the referendum, but the rest of the country didn't. And the rest of the country believes that there's a wider world out there that could be tapped into with the benefits of Brexit, negotiated or not, going forward for years to come. And this is not a flash-in-the-pan decision. This is something that the UK can embrace and mould a new vision for itself and place in the world with its allies across borders and continents. And it's a very positive step. And hopefully the people of London will recognise this in time, embrace it, and indeed embrace the opportunities that Brexit can bring.
Yeah, except that...
Could I say it?
Go ahead, Mary Honeyball.
Could I say it's no good trying to pin this on London. The result was 48-52. That's hardly anything. It was about 600,000 people out of an electorate of about 42 million. So we're not talking big majorities here. The referendum was carried on a knife edge, and I think those who want to leave should remember that. And I would also say that Project Fear was derided at the time as being too many experts saying too many pessimistic things about the economy. That's being borne out in practice now. We have inflation at the highest since 1997 at 2.9%. The growth in the UK economy is now the lowest in the EU, and we haven't even left yet. Sterling has just plummeted, as we've seen, not before this general election result, and it is still very much down on what it was before. So the economic consequences are already beginning to be felt. And as I said right at the beginning, there are now opinion polls which are beginning to show that people want to change their minds, that they don't think Brexit was such a good idea. They don't believe that we can be a global player. We can't,
but the
as a country, look back to the days of empire when we could be a global player, thanks to the British Empire. We are not there now. We are a medium-sized country. Yes, a great country, it's our country, and I love it as much as anybody else. But we have to recognise where we are and where our future lies, and it lies in cooperation with our neighbours.
But Mary Honeyball, the UK referendum, it's not going to be played out a second time. So what happens next? Is it a harder or a softer Brexit?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm just here in Europe, and I agree with the French person who has just been speaking on the panel. Actually, we see it very much from a British perspective in the UK, of course we do, but actually the way you see it here is very different. And in fact, we must recognise that it's the EU 27 who have the power in this. Britain will just be 1 against 27, and that's not a good place to start from. And so we've got to start thinking about how we go forward in this, given our relatively weak position.
François Lafont, that brings us to the topic of Theresa May's host here in Paris. Emmanuel Macron, he doesn't have a hung parliament. He's heading for a 3/4 majority in next Sunday's runoff of legislative elections. How does he play his hand when he's welcoming Theresa May? How does he handle her?
Well, I presume there are two sides of. First is legitimate to say a certain number of things. I mean, he's strong. The political situation of President Macron is very strong. Even if we don't have the result of the second turn of the election, he will have a huge majority, so he will be able to do the reforms he promised during the campaign. That's the first. The second is, of course, we still need UK for a certain number of important issues, for terrorism, for cooperation on defense, for immigration. So he will of course, continue to make sure that we have the bilateral relation the best possible. But the point is just to make sure that the UK will not impede the 27 other members of the European Union to continue to strengthen the unity and from the Eurozone, to make sure that we reinforce the structure in order to make sure the economy is going better. So the point is, we are going to deal...
But if the Germans want to play hardball, for instance, with the UK, will France go along with it?
We will see. I mean, the Chancellor is now in campaigning. We will see the result of the election 24th of September. So let's see how it will move on Germany. But for sure, the President Macron has a clear agenda is in mind, pro-European, and this is not Ms. May who will impede him to continue to do that.
Jeremy Stubbs?
Well, I think it's quite false to say that there are already economic indicators that suggest that we're in a decline and it's all because of Brexit. I mean, we haven't left yet, so I don't see the cause and effect there. I also think that we've been thinking about this for a long time. Many people have been discussing it. There are ways to reach a deal. There are ways. Whether you call them soft or hard, I think is irrelevant. We will reach it, and I think everybody has an incentive to do so. The main thing is that we should stop this period that we've had up until now, whereby people have been engaging in pre-match sparring. Jean-Claude Juncker, I admit on my side there was some of that too. All of that was, all right, it's good for the morale of the troops.
Does Macron understand this? Does Macron understand that he could, according to what you're saying, overplay his hand?
Well, he could do. I mean, he could actually take a lesson from the person he's meeting tonight and say that, you know, things can turn very, very quickly from success to failure. So he should think about that. But the thing is that he and Theresa May have already met. She received him in Downing Street. She's spoken to him. She congratulated him warmly when he was elected. They already have a relationship. I think there is some grounds for hope in that.
Mary Honeyball, you agree?
Well, possibly, yes. I mean, they have met before, but I don't think you can easily compare them. This general election we've just had was the first one Theresa May has ever fought as Prime Minister, and she didn't get anything like near the result that she wanted. Whereas Emmanuel Macron swept to power in France, again on a first attempt, but he won it, and she more or less lost it. I mean, she didn't get the majority she wanted to. So they are at different points in their politics and their political careers. I mean, I hope for the sake of all of us that they do manage to get on and they do actually come up with constructive suggestions. I mean, that's what we want. I mean, we all want this to be resolved in the best possible way for everybody, for the people of Britain and for the citizens of the EU. And I truly hope that that happens.
Rory Broomfield, on election night, when we saw Emmanuel Macron come out with his wife and they're playing the EU anthem, Ode to Joy, did you think, oh boy, here comes trouble?
Well, of course, what happens in France is up to the French people, and they obviously have an agenda which is different to the British people's. And I wish them well in their efforts to go deeper and into the Eurozone and into the EU if that's what they choose. But the British people took a different choice, and we want to work, of course, with European allies in a constructive, pragmatic way.
But what's your sense of Emmanuel Macron? Does he understand all of this?
Well, with a background in international finance, I believe he would have come across a lot of people within, as they say, the Anglo-Saxon banking model in London and New York and elsewhere, and also just genuinely have that perspective of openness, I think, to international trade and international cooperation, which, of course, the UK is still displaying and still wants to display.
François Lafont, you've been a panelist here many times to discuss the woes befalling the EU. For once, on this one, they have the momentum swinging their way. Again, it's not just France that could overplay its hand. It's also, you were mentioning, the European Union's negotiator, Michel Barnier. It's the people at the Commission. We heard the German finance minister today make remarks to the effect of it's not too late for Britain to reconsider its Brexit vote.
Of course, I mean, the European Union without the UK will not be the same. So that's for sure. So this is better if they reconsider their thought in a certain sense.
When you hear Wolfgang Schäuble say that, is that a provocation or does he mean it?
No, I think that the Germans are quite happy to have the Brits within the European Union because then they can play different countries. I mean, the Franco-German axis could be then with a triangle with the UK. So, but the point is, of course, the UK is a big country, and this is better to have the UK within the European Union. They have made a choice. The point now is just to make sure to have all the negotiation, but to have some decisions, because we cannot wait for just them to think about again more if they have better to go out or to stay in. We have to move on because the world is not waiting for us. I mean, the US, they are taking a certain number of decisions. China, India, Russia is still there. So, I mean, we have to move on.
Rory Broomfield, getting back to what you said a moment ago about your vision of Britain going forward, will that Britain have more in common with the EU or with Donald Trump's United States?
Well, I would say with Anglophone values, but of course that comes into the legal system, which is crucial in this debate. The UK operates in a different way in its legal approach than many EU nations, including France. And of course, we have commonalities with the wider world. But it's not about going back to any empire model. That's not what Brexiteers have ever really advocated, to my mind. It is about seeking cooperation in an open internationalist approach, which, of course, would benefit not just the people of the UK, but benefit people all around the world, knocking down barriers and increasing opportunities.
Mary Honeyball, you agree?
Not completely. First of all, on the whole question of the legal system, I actually sit on the Legal Affairs Committee in the European Parliament, so I do know what I'm talking about. And yes, the systems tend to be different in different countries, but we all believe in the same values. We're all out to achieve the same thing. So although it operates differently, we all have still the basic tenets and the basic values are the same across Europe. So I don't think that argument holds at all. And in terms of the Anglophone countries, It's a very interesting one, this, because we, particularly those of us who are a bit older and are brought up in the times of the Commonwealth, we view these as our natural allies. In fact, I'm not at all certain that most Commonwealth countries want too much to do with us. India has been quite clear that they see another way forward for themselves, and they are now a huge country. Selling goods and exporting to Australia and New Zealand is really not very much, because they're not very big countries. Australia is about 5% of the size of the EU, so we're going to lose out if we lose our exports, or a lot of our exports to the EU, and we will never make up for it with Australia and New Zealand and Canada. So it just doesn't work like that. And I think there's a real danger in getting too close to the United States. I mean, we've seen what President Trump is like. And there have been obviously United States presidents who we would be very happy to work with, but that isn't always the case. And of course we work with them in NATO and on defence and security issues, and we must continue to do that. But I think that in terms of ourselves, where Britain is in the world, where we're positioned, where our friends are, it's our neighbours. And any country that decides it wants to have looser ties with its neighbours than it already has really ought to think very hard about what it's doing.
All right, we're going to leave it there. We've run out of time. But Mary Honeybow, I want to thank you for joining us from Strasbourg. I want to thank Rory Broomfield in London, Jeremy Stubbs, and François Lafont. Thank you for being with us in the France 24 debate. Stay with us. Media Watch is next. And we say hello to James Creedon.
Hi, Francois. So a lot of buzz on social media, of course, about Theresa May's trip to Paris. And let's take a look at some of the broader commentary about that. Theresa May has flown to Paris for a meeting with Macron and will arrive with all of the impact of a deflating balloon. So there was a lot of that sort of comment on social media contrasting the different fortunes of Emmanuel Macron, who has come out of the first round of parliamentary elections looking like he's going to get a huge majority, and of course Theresa May's failed gamble, I suppose, in calling that snap election. So you have lots of images like this also doing the rounds of social media, picking up on or paraphrasing her, "I got us into this mess, I'm going to get us out of it," with an image from I can't remember the name of the film, but
Austin Powers.
Austin Powers, thank you. The line, "I made this mess, so I'm the best person to fix it," was first used by Home Secretary Charles Clarke, says one Twitter user, pointing out that he was sacked 2 weeks later. In other words, maybe it doesn't bode so well for her. Jeremy Cliff here on Twitter saying, "A year ago, Tory commentators were grandly hailing Europe's doom, and today Merkel and Macron are riding high while Britain..." Well, editorialising here is a laughing stock. Certainly, fortunes have shifted a lot in 1 year for various political systems. Macron's party polled 32% of the major vote, which is riding high. This is journalist Toby Young. Theresa May's polled 42.5% and is a laughing stock. Of course, that's because the political systems are very different.
Voting systems are different, yeah.
Indeed, but it does show that perhaps if you look at the precise figures, things aren't quite what they might seem at first glance. Now, this is all referring to the meeting of Theresa May with Conservative Party MPs, the fact that there's a lot of division after her failed gamble in calling that snap election. I'm really angry that Theresa May apologised to her MPs for this mess, but doesn't think the British public deserve that same response. So a lot of the comment actually is still based on, it's not so much the bilateral meeting with Emmanuel Macron, it's how she is managing the fallout of the general election. And this is one detail that got a lot of coverage as well today. John Major, former Prime Minister, urging Theresa May to pull out of the DUP deal over risk of violence returning to Northern Ireland. That, of course, is a very thorny issue, a party with links in the past to paramilitary organisations and certainly with quite regressive policies, and this coalition is seen as something that could endanger the peace process in Northern Ireland. Theresa May, when your government is considered a threat to peace by Sir John Major, it's time to resign before you hurt Britain anymore. Anyway, there's lots of comments on all of that, Francois, but I'm not sure if we have time to go into many of the other angles being discussed. There's a lot of reaction to the decision to demonise, as some are putting it, social media companies. That's one area that was discussed at one point of, I suppose, convergence in policies, tackling the ability of disseminating terror online. But in fact,
something that Emmanuel Macron and Theresa May were to talk about during their discussions.
Exactly. But online, on social networks, people are warning against censorship, that security versus freedom debate coming back again, as it so often does on this issue.
All right, we're almost out of time. Jeremy Stubbs, is Theresa May going to last more than 2 weeks, like that Twitter user was saying?
I think it's very likely now, yes. As long as she shows the kinds of qualities that